Hello there and welcome to our session on Startups, the International Context, as part of our Topic 4, the Startup Decision on our course on International Entrepreneurship. Now for this session we're going to look at the first learning outcome of the topic area. So by the end of the session you will have been introduced to the business startup process in an international context and through case studies. So let's remind ourselves really quickly about the GEM framework of Total Early Stage Entrepreneurial Activity, or TEA. This comes in two parts. So first of all, the TEA refers to being a nascent entrepreneur. And nascent entrepreneurs are those who are involved in setting up a business from 0 to 3 months. But TEA also includes owner-managers of new businesses. These new businesses are up to 3.5 years old. The framework isn't really interested in looking at older businesses than this. Now, still with GEM 2014 report, you can see how nascent entrepreneurs differ over a variety of different countries. So the rates or frequency of nascent entrepreneurs differs depending on what country we're visiting. Staying with GEM 2014 data, we can also see how the frequency of owner-managers of slightly more mature businesses again differ over a variety of different countries. In other words, the frequency of owner-managers of new businesses up to 3.5 years old differs depending on what country we're looking at. What's super interesting is when we start to compare the two stats together. When we start to compare nascent enterprises to owner-managers of new businesses, we can see some really interesting things. Now, let's take Venezuela as an example. You can find Venezuela on the graphs in front of you on the right-hand side, right at the very end there. Okay, got it? Okay, good. Now, you should be able to determine from the graphs that the rates or the frequency of nascent enterprises or nascent entrepreneurs is much higher than the frequency of owner-managers of new businesses in Venezuela. Why is this? Well, different countries will have different reasons for their variations. In Venezuela, maybe we can say that it's relatively easy to start a new business, start a new enterprise, but to progress that enterprise into being an owner-manager of a new business is maybe more difficult. What's key here from these two graphs to take away in terms of the context of this topic area is that the startup decision across many different countries will vary. Okay, so let's start off with a mini case example of Innocent Smoothies. If you're not familiar with the brand, I suggest at this point you press pause and you just have a little bit of a play around on their website. So you go to www.innocentdrinks.co.uk. So a little bit of background for you. Richard Reed is one of the 3 co-founders of Innocent Smoothies, and his 3 friends had proper jobs in marketing before they started the firm. How they started the firm in terms of their startup decision was relatively unorthodox. In the summer of 1998, when we had developed our first smoothie recipes, we were still nervous about giving up our proper jobs. We bought £500 worth of fruit, turned it into smoothies, and sold them from a stall at a little music festival in London. We'd have put a big sign up saying, "Do you think we should give up our jobs to make these smoothies?" Put out a bin saying yes, and put out a bin saying no. And we asked people to put the empty bottle in the right bin to reflect their decision. At the end of the weekend, the yes bin was so full we went in the next day and resigned. So says Richard Reed. The growth and development certainly hasn't been an easy road for them. Searching for finance turned out to be far more difficult because the team had no background in the juice industry and they were turned down over 20 times by the banks. Finally, they were backed by an American business angel, but he took 20% in the business, but they at least managed to get started. Now, for a long time, the 3 founders owned 70% and business angel 20%, and 10% was given to employees. Now, however, the firm has been sold in the majority of the shares to Coca-Cola. The company as a whole, though, has grown to have a current turnover of around £100 million and a business value of an estimated £175 million. The company, though, is also run on very ethical lines, with ownership remaining largely in the hands of the three founders and the company employees up until fairly recently. Despite the company being sold to Coca-Cola, the brand still involves itself in quite a heavy ethical or CSR concern. Fairly frequently, the firm, for example, involves itself in what it calls the Big Knit Project. Usually over winter time, when you buy your smoothie, it comes with this sort of little mini knitted hat. And the idea is that consumers collect these as they purchase more and more smoothies. 25 pence out of every smoothie sold, though, is given to something called Age UK. And this is a charity based in the UK that's concerned with the welfare of the elderly. So time for a question, I think. Okay, so how would you describe the startup experience at Innocent? Do you think it was an easy process or not? Press pause, think a little bit, and then when you're ready, move on. So let's move on to our mini case example number 2. And this time we're going to India and we're going to be looking at Sula Wines. So a little bit of background for you. Ranjiv Samant is the founder of Sula Wines and he's still there today. He started winemaking largely by chance. So back in the early 1990s, Ranjiv, who was a Stanford-trained engineer, he grew very tired and very bored of corporate life in Silicon Valley, which is where he was working as a finance manager at Oracle. So very, very different to the wine industry. He moved back to India to take over his father's property near their native city, Nashik. There's a 28-acre rural estate near Nashik of around 180 kilometres northeast of Mumbai. Now, Nashik is India's largest grape-growing region, but traditionally the area has never grown wine grapes. For 4 years he tried growing a range of different sorts of crops, including organic mangoes, peanuts, roses, and then table grapes, which were already at that point common in the region. So there was a market opportunity there, and it was ready to be exploited. But it was actually a letter from a girlfriend that started the whole process. She asked whether wine grapes were also being grown in the region, and that provided the inspiration to start growing wine grapes. Kerry Damsky, a winemaker from California's Sonoma Valley, joined the company and they planned Sula's first vines in 1997. Seed capital for the business was provided by friends and family, and Rajiv's former chemistry teacher was the company's first winemaker. So Sula Wines is built on a long history of winemaking in India overall, but not specifically in this geographical area. When the company was founded, the industry was dominated though by 2 producers, the Indaj Group and Grover Vineyards, which were based in Bangalore in the south, both of which began winemaking in the 1980s. Sula Wines targeted a premium market, selling initially at around 450 rupees a bottle, which is quite expensive. Initial sales were slow, but they were boosted by Sula-branded parties for blue-chip companies and door-to-door selling to restaurants and hotels. In its first year of sales in 2000, Sula sold 4,000 cases of its first wine, a 1999 Sauvignon Blanc. In 2003, the company got a break. The company benefited when the government cut excise duty, which up until that point was huge on wine. This provided an increase in margins which could be used for marketing. A second winery with 3 times the capacity of the first was completed in late 2004 to keep up with demand, and a third million-litre winery started operations 2 years later in 2006. The 4 wineries that Sula owns today have a combined capacity of 5 million litres. Sula has expanded from the original 30-acre family estate to 1,500 acres. owned and contracted under plantation, both in Nashik as well as in nearby Dindori. This year, Sula will plant another 800 acres of vineyards, bringing its total to 2,500 acres. Sales are expected to reach $22 million in 2008, and that's up 60% on the previous year. This means that the company is now the number 2 in the Indian wine market.
But now I think it's time for a question. So, press pause and consider. What are the common features in these two startup stories? When you finish reflecting, you can move on to the next section in 4C.